Hello students, welcome to the lecture on nonverbal communication, and after this lecture we will be able to learn the following objectives. Understand body language, define gestures in nonverbal communication, explain postures in nonverbal communication, define facial expressions in nonverbal communication, explain dress codes in nonverbal communication, discuss the cross-cultural dimensions of business communication, describe listening and speaking, understand the techniques of electing response and probing questions. Let's start with a brief introduction to communication. Communication is more than verbal. Good negotiators must first be good communicators. Unfortunately, many negotiators think of communication only as oral or written verbal exchanges. But verbal exchanges account for only a fraction of the messages people send and receive. Research has shown that between 70 and 90% of the entire communication spectrum is nonverbal. Consequently, we should be aware of the different forms of nonverbal communication that are likely to encounter during negotiation conferences. Although we continually send and receive nonverbal messages, most of us are not fully aware of the ways that we communicate nonverbally. Still, if we watch carefully, we will see that most leading professionals, example doctors, lawyers, politicians, corporate chief executive officers and contract negotiators are excellent non-verbal communicators. Some people call it charisma. Others call it style. Whatever it is, they have it. Good communication is the foundation of successful relationships, both personal and professional. But we communicate with much more than words. Most of the messages we send other people are non-verbal. Non-verbal communication includes our facial expressions, gestures, eye contact, posture and tone of voice. The ability to understand and use non-verbal communication or body language is a powerful tool that can help us connect with others, express what we really mean, navigate challenging situations and build better relationships. Students, what do you understand by the term body language? Body language is the way we hold and move our bodies when we are giving or receiving information. There are two broad types of body language: open body language and closed body language. Some body languages theorists say that these are very old behaviors which date back to our early ancestors. By maintaining open body language, our ancestors showed that they have no concealed weapons hidden behind their back, their armpits or in their hands. By opening our hands, unfolding our hands and bodies, we still show that we mean the other person no harm. Type of the body language: handshakes. Another vital component we need to bring to any interpersonal encounter is a firm handshake. Again, those few seconds we shake can empower or weaken a relationship. Men's handshakes are typically strong and firm because they naturally have a stronger grip. Women get a grip and be noticed. Controller. A person extends his hand to us, web to web, and as soon as our hands are linked, he purposely maneuvers his hand on the top. He is telling us he wants to be in charge. Keep that in mind as the interaction continues. Sandwich. Use this one only with people we know. When we envelop another person's hands, we are invading their private space where we are to be only when invited. Society promotes the standard handshake but is not as tolerant of using both hands. By the way, this handshake is also known as the politician's handshake, which may be cause enough for most people to avoid it. Dead fish. Imagine rubbing a scaly, dead fish in our hands and we got the picture. Our hands are typically wet for two reasons. We are nervous or we have been holding a good beverage and we are holding right hand and move it. In either case, it is extremely unpleasant for the receiver. Limp fingers. Women, far more than men, extend their fingers rather than their entire hand. It can be painful for the extender when she is greeted by a man who shakes with his forceful grip. Men tell me this frequently leads to their giving women a lighter handshake. Professional women respond that they want to be treated equally. Ingredients of a good handshake: hold the person's hand firmly. Shake web to web 3 times maximum. Maintain constant eye contact. Radiate positive aura. Eye contact: make it and keep it. Not only does focused eye contact display confidence on our part, it also helps we understand what the other person is really saying verbally. When the eyes say one thing and the tongue another, a practiced man relies on the language of the first. Listening is the most important human relation skill, and good eye contact plays a large part in conveying our interest in others. When to look: begin as soon as we engage someone in a conversation. However, we may wish to start even earlier if we are trying to get someone's attention. Continue it throughout the conversation. Be sure to maintain direct eye contact as we are saying goodbye. It will help leave a positive, powerful, lasting impression. Facial expression. Facial expressions are responsible for a huge proportion of nonverbal communication. Consider how much information can be conveyed with a smile or a frown. While nonverbal communication and behavior can vary dramatically between cultures, the facial expressions for happiness, sadness, anger, and fear are similar throughout the world. Paralinguistic. Paralinguistic refers to vocal communication that is separate from actual language. This includes factors such as a tone of voice, loudness, inflection, and pitch. Consider the powerful effect that tone of voice can have on the meaning of a sentence. When said in a strong tone of voice, listeners might interpret approval and enthusiasm. The same word said in a hesitant tone of voice might convey disapproval and a lack of interest. Proxemics. People often refer to their needs for personal space, which is also an important type of nonverbal communication. The amount of distance we need and the amount of space we perceive as belonging to us is influenced by a number of factors, including social norms, situational factors, personality characteristics, and level of familiarity. For example, the amount of personal space needed when having a casual conversation with another person usually varies between 18 inches to 4 feet. Appearance. Our choice of color, clothing, hairstyles, and other factors affecting appearance are also considered a means of nonverbal communication. Research on color psychology has demonstrated that different colors can evoke different moods. Appearance can also alter physiological reactions, judgments, and interpretations. Just think of all the subtle judgments we quickly make about someone based on his or her appearance. Now let's discuss the gestures in nonverbal communication. Basically, it is one of the key aspects of communication. It has multiple functions. Used to repeat the verbal messages. Example, point in a direction while stating directions. Often used to accent a verbal communication. Example, verbal tone indicates the actual meaning of the specific words. Often complement the verbal message but also may contradict. Example of nod reinforces a positive message. Among Americans, a wink may contradict a stated positive message. Regulate interactions. Nonverbal cues convey when the other person should speak or not speak. Differences in nonverbal communication. General appearance and dress. All cultures are concerned for how they look and make judgments based on looks and dress. Americans, for instance, appear almost obsessed with dress and personal attractiveness. Body movement. We send information on attitude toward person facing or leaning towards another. Emotional statute. Tapping fingers, jiggling coins, and desire to control the environment moving towards or away from a person. Smiles. Smiles are an important facial expression. They show interest, excitement, empathy, concern. They create an upbeat, positive environment. Eye contact. Keep eye contact, avoid constantly looking around the room while we are talking because that can convey nervousness or a lack of confidence with what is being discussed. Handshake. While shaking hands, especially in a professional environment, the handshake should be firm and not loose. An iron handshake can indicate that a person is trying to dominate. Gestures are woven inextricably into our social lives, but also that the vocabulary of gestures can be at once informative and entertaining, but also dangerous. Gestures can be menacing, two drives on a freeway, warm, an open armed welcome, instructive, a policeman giving road directions, or even sensuous, the liquid movement of a Hawaiian hula dancer. Bear in mind that the following gestures are in general use, but there may always be exceptions. In recent years, Western and contemporary values and ideas have become more popular and have either influenced, altered, and even replaced some of the more traditional gestures. Understanding human behavior is tricky stuff. No two people behave in precisely the same way, nor do people from the same culture or perform exactly the same gestures and body language uniformly. Postures and nonverbal communication. Knowing the meanings of our body postures and movements can enhance our communication successfully with other individuals. By reading a person's body language, we could understand her true thoughts and feelings. This happens because the subconscious mind usually shows the true thoughts of a person by particular movements that person makes or by his or her body posture. People are usually drawn towards a good personality. The public speaking course in Mumbai also involves the concept of personality development and initiates us to begin a new way of improving our confidence. Body language requires practicing a pose that also gives a message of speaking with conviction. Often eye contact is a means to register interest and sincerity which has to be maintained with all the participants. The biggest challenge during public speaking is to maintain the poise, which is the effect of a good emotional intelligence. Any kind of distraction, counter opinion or objection has to be dealt with a lot of self-control. Facial expressions in non-verbal communication. In the business world, much emphasis is placed on saying the right things at the right time. Whether in a board meeting, on a sales call, or in the boss's office asking for a promotion, most of us know that every word counts. But what about all the communication happening that does not involve words at all? Non-verbal communication often speaks just as loudly as words, although its comprehension and improvement is given much less attention. By becoming more conscious about one's non-verbal habits, one can ensure that the messages they are sending are clear and effective. The most important things to consider when thinking about non-verbal communication, especially as it relates to doing business. First in the series is perhaps the most important and time-consuming area to improve facial expressions.
Vocal cues and facial expressions.
Communications, as we all know, takes place on two levels, both the verbal as well as nonverbal. Today we're going to be covering and discussing nonverbal communications.
Many studies say that 92% of the way another person is going to be impacted by you, or it's going to figure out what they think of you, is completely nonverbal.
Nonverbal communication provides information, regulates interpersonal interactions, expresses emotion, enables metacommunication, controls social situations, and helps to formulate impressions.
So what is communication? And more specifically, what is nonverbal communication?
Communications can be defined as the process of sending a message in such a way that it can be received and understood by the receiver, as well as accepted. Nonverbal communication is the process of transferring information without words.
In this program, we will explore three aspects of nonverbal communication: vocalic communication, facial expressions, and eye behaviors. We will look at their place in the broader realm of communication and highlight their role in establishing personal and professional relationships. Vocalic Communication.
The human voice is like an instrument we use to produce sounds. When we discuss vocalic communication, we are looking beyond the actual words that are spoken and instead exploring the characteristics of the sounds behind them. We call these vocal cues.
There's so many things about the quality of voice which has nothing to do with the actual words. Is it low? Is it high? Do they speak quickly? Is there an accent or not?
Vocal cues can be defined broadly as the attributes of sound that convey or communicate meaning.
Vocal cues are differentiated based upon the unique sound attributes of a person's speaking voice. Those sound characteristics are often divided into 9 distinct categories that, when taken together, offer a complete picture of a person's voice.
Characteristics of vocal cues would include such things as volume, pitch, rate or pace, duration, quality, regularity, articulation, pronunciation, or simply silence.
Facial expressions are definitely the most talked about topic when it comes to nonverbal communication, and rightfully so. From eyes to eyebrows to mouth to forehead and more, there are a number of factors to consider when looking at facial expressions. Body language, and in particular face language, communicates more powerfully than words. Messages pass between us silently, and for the most part we do not even know they are there. Have we ever caught we are self-smiling, frowning, or even making gestures with our hands while we are talking on the phone? Unless we are on a video call, the person we are talking to cannot see us, but we do it anyway. In fact, it is quite hard to talk with a completely expressionless face. Hence, the rise of emoticons for email and texting. Like them or not, emoticons and smileys help to get a feeling across when words might be misunderstood. Emotions expressed through facial expressions. Few examples of emotions that can be expressed via facial expressions include happiness, sadness, anger, surprise, disgust, fear, confusion, excitement, desire, contempt. Dress codes in verbal communication. Every organization has a set dress code to be followed by all employees, irrespective of position in the hierarchy. While most companies follow a formal code except on weekends, there are some who have a relaxed dress code. Whatever be the case, employees should adhere to the defined dress code. Not conforming to company norms is considered unethical. It also indicates a sense of flippancy and a casual attitude, says the HR professional. Most of the times it is important to be rightly and neatly dressed, but not always be well dressed. Wearing clean footwear is also a part of sartorial discipline. The small business tips today discuss nonverbal communication with a dress code are: have everyone dress similarly to show unity and professionalism. Wear our business representation proudly. Simple is key. Try incorporating We Are logo into attire, pin, name tag, shirt to distinguish employees from customers. A simple dress code could be to have all employees wear black or blue as symbols of power and sophistication. All employees dressing the same can help to establish that we are serious about our work and business. The cross-cultural dimensions of business communication. Business is not conducted in an identical fashion from culture to culture. Consequently, business relations are enhanced when managerial, sales, and technical personnel are trained to be aware of areas likely to create communication difficulties and conflict across cultures. Similarly, international communication is strengthened when business people can anticipate areas of commonality. Finally, business in general is enhanced when people from different cultures find new approaches to old problems. creating solutions by combining cultural perspectives and learning to see issues from the viewpoint of others. In business, communication conducted across cultures often arise when participants from one culture are unable to understand culturally determined differences in communication practices, traditions, and thought processing. At the most fundamental level, problems may occur when one or more of the people involved cling to an ethnocentric view of how to conduct business. Ethnocentrism is the belief that one's own cultural group is somehow innately superior to others. Listening and speaking. Communication within the workplace comes in many forms. The most obvious are oral and written, but many other aspects of our behavior communicate an impression to others. Our body language, tone of voice, facial expressions, gestures, and eye contact all send out signals whether we want them or not. For example, a smile might soothe a situation while a chuckle could be misconstrued as making fun of someone. Talking does not unequivocally mean that we are communicating. In the midst of conversation, the actual art of communication can sometimes get lost. As listeners, we are eager to show that we understand something before we really do. We might nod our heads and the speaker assumes we get it and moves on. As talkers, we often assume that someone knows what we are talking about before we clarify. This process can turn into a vicious cycle of misunderstandings. If we, as a listener, do not understand a certain word or instructions for a task, stop and ask for clarification. Many of us worry about being a bother, but it is much better to take time at the beginning to ensure effective work gets done in the end. Often when entering a new company, new industry, or even just a new peer group, we encounter new words. It is important to be observant and learn to communicate with specific buzzwords or acronyms relevant to our profession. Listening with the intent to understand takes focus and concentration. Do not simply think about what we want to say next. Taking notes can help us focus on what the speaker is saying and shows the speaker that we are giving the discussion importance. Listening is a significant part of communication process. Communication cannot take place until and unless a message is heard and retained thoroughly and positively by the receivers or listeners. Listening is a dynamic process. Listening means attentiveness and interest perceptible in the posture as well as expressions. Listening implies decoding, that is, translating the symbols into meaning and interpreting the messages correctly in communication process.
Okay, now I know this is going to sound utterly obvious, but so many times I've assessed speaking and listening tasks from students and been absolutely amazed by the lack of preparation that they've put in. You know, lots of you are actually able to achieve really good marks in speaking and listening tasks, but really haven't kind of put in the groundwork. So my first tip is really make sure you know what you're talking about. Research your topic, perhaps creating some prompt cards, and rehearse using those prompt cards. Perhaps then when you feel comfortable using the cards, then actually try and do that without using them. I think a good idea is to rehearse in front of your friends or family because it kind of gets you in that real audience, participation, and just helps to kind of build confidence a bit as well. You know they're on your side. Maybe ask them to ask you some questions and just test your ability to respond to any questions you might get thrown, and really rehearse some more. Now, eye contact is, really key to a decent speaking and listening assessment. It can sometimes feel a bit awkward or embarrassing to make eye contact. We can feel nervous, lose our focus, but it really does help to kind of create that relationship with your audience, and it can keep their interest because they feel if you're looking at them that they've got to listen a bit harder. And even if you're sort of feeling sick with nerves inside, it does help you helps make you look confident, even if you're feeling worried. Intonation means basically to change the tone of your voice, so change the pitch, change the sound effects that you're making. So rather than talking in a monotone, which is very boring, try changing the volume, the pitch of your voice to try and create a few different effects. And again, keeps people's interest. It's really key that you try to use standard English. This is what we would call kind of proper posh English, and sometimes you might have heard it referred to as the Queen's English. Now, sounds probably quite obvious, but we don't want to see slang or swear words, and you should try to be grammatically accurate wherever possible. You should also try to avoid using filling words like and like, because it just makes you sound as though you don't really know what you're saying. I'm really conscious as I'm doing this tutorial of just how many times we use fillers, but with practice and with plenty of rehearsal, you should find that you use fewer of them than if you've prepared a little less. See, I just did an after I've just said that. Right, sophisticated vocabulary is crucial. We've got two examples here from students doing presentations on someone who's important to them. And it should be fairly obvious if you read through those two examples which one is using the more sophisticated and original and interesting vocabulary. And really it shows off loads of different skills. Not only does it engage your audience, but it also shows you've got a strong command of the English language. Now, confidence is my next tip. Really easy to tell you to be confident when you're doing a speaking and listening assessment, and much harder to do it in real life. And I know that for loads of people, the thought of standing up maybe in front of a class or a teacher is really terrifying. I know that because whenever we have speaking and listenings, the attendance that lesson is always down. But everyone's in the same position. The best thing you can do is just get really stuck in. Bear in mind, everyone's in the same boat. No one's laughing at you. They're with you. And really it's a case of sticking a smile on your face, speaking clearly, trying to be enthusiastic, and, if all else fails, fake a bit of confidence. Now, obviously your assessment is called speaking and listening, and we focus a lot of the time on speaking skills, but listening is equally important. Now, sometimes people just think listening is being quiet while someone else talks, but that's not really the case. We don't want you sitting there like a sack of potatoes, totally bored, planning what you're going to watch that night or what you're having for your tea. What we're looking for is active listening. It really requires you to focus carefully on what the other person's saying. Now, there are ways to show that you're paying attention. Eye contact, smiles, sitting up in your seat, not slumped there. And you might need to be able to respond to what you've heard. So, particularly in a discussion situation, asking questions, or even challenging the other person about their point of view. And this should go without saying, but don't interrupt or undermine someone. We don't want to see people laughing when someone's talking, or having another conversation, going on their phones. It's hugely disrespectful, if nothing else.
Now in the end, let us summarize what we have learnt in this lecture. Good communication is the foundation of successful relationships, both personal and professional. But we communicate with much more than words. Body language is the way that we hold and move our bodies when we are giving or receiving information. People often refer to their need for personal space, which is also an important type of nonverbal communication. Gestures and body language communicate as effectively as words, maybe even more effectively. We use gestures daily, almost instinctively, from beckoning to a waiter or punctuating a business presentation with visuals. Gross translation errors, though frequent, may be less likely to cause conflict between parties than other language difficulties for two reasons. The drive for success in business is customer satisfaction. Customers always want to make sure that they receive good quality service from the companies they have decided to make business with.